What's up, everybody? This is Dr. Nick with Leverage Media, and today I've got one of my most favorite types of episodes with the Path to a Million podcast. It is when I have my mentor, Dr. Stephen Franson from the Remarkable Practice on. Doc, how's it going?
Hey, Dr. Nick, always a pleasure. I appreciate you asking me back.
Yeah,
always means something when you get asked back to a podcast. So it's great to see you, brother.
Well, I think I always say this when I go on yours, that I think I'm your all-time leading guest so far, and I think this makes you my all-time leading guest. I think.
How about that, man?
Yeah, I think this is your third appearance, so this I can't think of anybody else that's been on 3 times. So we are on equal footing there. So the last time we talked, we basically kicked off COVID. I think it was the last event that I went to right before the lockdowns happened. We were in Scottsdale, and there was a pool party at the hotel, and I think that was maybe ground zero.
That was ground zero, man. Remember that pool scene?
that was pretty wild.
If you jumped into that pool, it was chock-a-block. There were bodies. I mean, literally, it looked like a mosh pit of questionable characters.
Yeah.
If all you came out of there with COVID, you lucked out, I think.
That's right.
That was a scary scene.
So we are going to be talking about, you guys have got a couple of immersions coming up focused on attraction. I think it's 3 times a year now in the US and 3 times a year in Australia. You guys have attractions around those core pillars that you teach on. My favorite is obviously attraction, and we've got that coming up in, I think it's September 30th, October 1st in Denver. And then for the Australian group, it is October 14th and 15th in Melbourne.
That's right.
So we're going to drop the links to that in the show notes. But I'm excited to talk to you because, I'm in the TRP CEO group, and you coach the small group that I'm in. And, whenever we talk about marketing, we're always talking about budgets, how people should be thinking about it. And I thought, who better to bring on to talk about these things that CEOs should be thinking about as the economy starts to turn. Where should your mind be when it comes to attracting people into the practice? So let's kind of start with what you're seeing right now. What have you seen, since COVID, since things opened back up? What's been your experience? Because you deal with a lot of successful practices.
Yeah, Nick. So, going into COVID, like everyone, we were experiencing best evers.
Mm-hmm.
You can remember 2018, 2019, everybody was just jamming, and was expecting 2020 to be the same, and, of course, the Pearl Harbor moment of COVID that happened, right after our last conversation.
Right.
And yeah, it rocked everyone, right? It was the first time we've had, a cataclysmic, event like that was affecting everyone, to different degrees, granted, but around the world, right? So, it was a bit of a shock and awe for most chiros. And, to be honest, we had the opportunity to jump right into action and put together a plan for our clients. And really, we just released it to everybody in chiropractic when we talked about that Phoenix plan, which was really a 3-part response to the situation when no one really knew what was going on, but we knew what we could do, right?
Yeah.
So we went through that stabilization stage, and then we went into the reactivation stage, and then we went into the mobilization stage. And thank heavens, we were spot on, and our clients and anybody who employed that Phoenix plan, they did really, really well. And saw enormous, growth net over that 2-year disaster, that catastrophe. But it was a 15-round heavyweight fight, right? So, and even when you win the heavyweight fight, it's still a fight. So I think we all have enjoyed this last 12 months, maybe with the notable exceptions of like the Canadian craziness and Australian, which has really started to open up. We have clients all around the world. And of course, I'll speak about chiropractic around the world because I know your reach. The last 12 months have been awesome, right? So super generally speaking, but the world started opening back up. People dumped back into the marketplace. And really, if you had positioned your practice properly, people were pouring right back into your practice, right? So for those of us who have always educated our patients on what chiropractic is and the value of chiropractic, they never really missed a beat, right? So during COVID, I remember saying, there's only two types of chiropractic practices in the world today: those that have educated their patients and those that wish they had. Right. So, those patients, or I should say those practices, just really, they made it through and they got to the other side and really have ramped up for the last 12 months. So, that's the now. Let's talk about the next, right? So what I want to make sure that we recognize is that, we are, if we're future casting here, as we look into the future, we know that at the very best, we're going to be facing times of economic uncertainty. I mean, frankly, we're already there, right? So I'm not going to jump on the recession bandwagon. Everybody's talking about recession proofing your business, but if that helps you think about what we're going to be talking about here today, specifically from a marketing perspective, I think that we're at a tremendous advantage right now looking forward, because we can really position our practices well to take advantage of what I would consider maybe counterintuitive opportunities that are going to be all around us, right? So truth is, Nick, you're a business guy. You know that fortunes are made in the downturn, right? So you've got to make sure that you position your business, your practice, and yourself, frankly, to take advantage of these opportunities that are going to be all around you in the marketplace to come.
Right. I think that, if things do turn and if they start to slide and it starts to really impact, Main Street, not just Wall Street, that just the same way, I don't think I've ever really gotten to like publicly thank you for the Phoenix plan, but it was something that you and your team could, and me and my team could actually control. The rest of it, it's like, there's lots of things that you can't control. And I talk about a lot of this, like when it comes to marketing, there's all kinds of things that you have no control over. But your actions and your mindset are things that you can control. And the Phoenix plan really gave my office something that we could control and we could take action on. And I think that the economy, most of how people feel about the economy is based on, like the news that they consume and just kind of like vibes, like how they're feeling about things. But if you can just focus on the things that you can control and go into it with a growth mindset, regardless of what's happening in the macro, in the micro, in your practice, you could be the one shining star in your community or in
exactly right.
Chiropractic in your town. So like the less that you get involved with the group think around like how the economy is, the more likely you are to come out the other side even stronger. So
you couldn't be more right. So, mindset determines physiology. Physiology primes your behaviors and performance, right? So, and that drives your outcome.
Yeah.
So, the idea of like looking forward, you can jump into this group think and, have a lot of anxiety around the future, or you can be excited about the opportunities. And, the only difference, it's the same physiology, right? The only difference between anxiety and excitement is an attitude, right? So as much as you can't change or choose your situation, you can always choose your attitude, right? And that may not change the situation, but it'll absolutely change your experience of it. So, I think that that's a great place to start as leaders. When you're talking about leading your team and leading your patients, is that you do have to have this attitude of opportunity and positivity. And that's not BS, right? Because the truth is there are opportunities in front of us. So, number one in my mind's eye is what an opportunity for us to check ourselves on our branding and our brand messaging and our brand promise and tighten that all up, right? So, at the end of the day, your brand is not what you tell your community about you. It's what your community says about you and your business, right? So ultimately you got to ask yourself, what does our community say about our business, right? So do they know we exist? They know what we do. They know why we do it, right? So it's an opportunity to check yourself and say, okay, so what is my brand? What is my brand messaging? And how have I positioned this practice? Because if you want to talk about recession proof, there's nothing as recession proof as healthcare, right? So at the end of the day, here's what we know is going to be true. It's going to be stressful. It's already stressful, right? But, things are going to get more stressful, most likely, right? So, if you know that to be true, think about your community. Your community is going to be stressed. Your community knows they're stressed. They know they're going to become more stressed. Your community knows that stress causes sickness. What they don't know is that your nervous system is a system that helps you adapt to and cope with and even thrive in stress and stressful situations. It's literally the definition of health and wellness, the body's ability to adapt readily and appropriately to stressors. So does your community know that? Probably not. And I'll venture to say that your community definitely doesn't know that you're a chiropractor, and a chiropractor is the expert that specializes in making sure that the nervous system is clear of interference so that it can optimally help you adapt to and cope with stressors. So, Nick, when you think about it, if you position yourself properly here and recognize that, the nervous system is the system that adapts to stress, if the community knows that the chiropractor is the expert that helps optimize that system, when stress goes up, so should your volume.
Right. And the louder you can scream that, especially ahead of the stress, like if you can start to lay the groundwork for that being your brand before they get stressed, instead of like waiting until everybody's worried and then coming in and trying to make the message, it works a lot better if you've been saying it all along, and then they, tend to find that message.
That's exactly right. And that really, that's the opportunity here, right? The opportunity is you can get out ahead of this, right? So we don't know whether this is going to be 3 months out, 6 months out, 9 months out, a year out, or how deep or how long it's going to last.
Yeah.
But what we do know is it's some of that is coming down the pike. At the very best, it's going to be a stressful situation based on economic uncertainty. Can you imagine if you and I had this conversation 6 months before COVID hit and we said, listen, you want to make sure you're positioning your practice so that people understand immunocompromise. They're going to need to understand the immune system and neuroimmunology. Make sure that they understand that interference in the nervous system interferes with the optimal function of the immune system. You want to be talking about immunocompromise. You want to be talking about the benefits of chiropractic care as related to immune system function, et cetera. Can you imagine if you did that for 6 months unrelentingly before COVID? It might have been a different situation for you.
Absolutely.
You're exactly right. Get out ahead of this thing right now.
Well, talking to doctors all the time, when things start to tighten up, whether it's like a macro or a micro issue, maybe their practice is just like, it's because, like, for example, after COVID, a lot of the offices that were very dependent on external events, lunch and learns, spinal screenings, all of a sudden they were in a panic because their new patient flow had slowed to a trickle because they had put no effort into their online presence because they were satisfied with what they were getting from internal and external. So I know that when top line revenue starts to shrink, people start to get scared. And the thing that they, usually first pull back on are marketing expenses. What are your thoughts? I know we've talked about this in our group quite a bit in the marketing conversation of where I'd never heard anybody say it the way that you did with the I can't remember what the name of it is called, the hedge funds, how they think about like marketing budgets and how businesses should be thinking about that. So if you could just kind of talk about that a little bit.
So it's another opportunity that, is coming down the pike right now. Is the reality is we're already seeing this happen in businesses, specifically big businesses, and especially with publicly traded businesses, right? Because businesses think about the bottom line and they think about their profit margin quarter to quarter because they have shareholders to answer to. Yeah. So, ultimately you'll see two things happen. Number one is you'll see them pull back on their marketing spend. Right. So as they pull back on their marketing spend, they feel like, okay, so I can control this. I might not be able to control the sales and revenue, but I can control my expenses. And the first thing they go for is they cut back on their revenue spend, which is a fatal error. Right. So, this historical precedent.
You can't cut back on rent, on utilities,
that's right,
on taxes. So it's like the one discretionary, especially with smaller businesses, the one discretionary big budget item that they usually have is marketing expenses.
That's right. That's right. And here's why this is an opportunity. That's a fatal mistake. Number one, to think that way. And you're missing out on an opportunity because, when everyone around you, the businesses around you are pulling back on their marketing spend, the noise level drops. And next thing you know, there's an opportunity for you to be really heard. Right. Yeah. So make more noise, like ramp it up. Don't pull it back. Right. Yeah. So, and your, cost per acquisitions is going to drop. Right. So now you're getting more bang for your buck on top of this. It's a double whammy. Right. So the opportunity is here that marketing budget needs to hold true or it needs to be ramped up and take advantage of the, the quieting effect that happens when people start pulling back on their marketing. Don't lean back, lean in.
And this is why it's so important for you to understand your KPIs, different streams of new patients. How expensive is it to acquire somebody through social media versus search versus events versus dinner with the doc, like whatever you're doing. If the more you understand your KPIs, the easier it is to turn that dial up. Because when you can turn your marketing into a math problem and you're like, well, I can expect to get, a new patient or a start or a show up or a lead or whatever, a prospect, whatever you want to be tracking, how much does it cost in this channel versus this channel versus this channel? Then when it's time to turn it up, it's like you can turn it up on this channel, maybe leave the other channels the way they are because this one is going to be productive and there's still room to grow. So it's just important, like what we talk about in the CEO program, it's just like understanding your numbers, letting that information flow to you so that you can then make those decisions. So can you talk about the formula that you've shared with us on marketing budgets and how people should be thinking about that in terms of spend?
Sure. Just in the context of what you just said, if you want to run a data-driven business, right? So, which means that you want to do data-driven marketing. So for some people, that's really unnerving because they're like, I don't have my metrics, I don't have my numbers, right? Mm-hmm. So you get a choice. You either get emotions or you get metrics, right? So, ultimately when it comes to marketing, you don't want to be marketing emotionally. Okay. So, most chiropractors are, they've got good instincts, right? So they operate on their gut and they have a good gut. So they use it, right? So, ultimately to become a CEO, you really have to be 1 part gut, 2 parts data. So you need that data. So once you have the data, then you don't have emotions. Like you said, you turn marketing into a math problem. Yeah. And I love the expression, marketing is not hard, it's organized. And ultimately that means reporting systems and meeting rhythms, right? Having accountability. So you don't get anxious. You don't have nerves. You get anxious when you don't know something, when you don't understand something. But if you have visibility and there's accountability around those metrics, you invest. You don't feel like you're just spraying and praying, right? So ultimately, it requires you have the data. If anybody needs help with that, let us know. We'll help you get there. So, the equation that we profess and teach inside of the Remarkable Practice System is to arrive at a marketing plan with a marketing team and a marketing budget, right? So the marketing plan, starts with a vision, your vision of what are you trying to accomplish? What does success look like for you? And that's usually a vision story. And then you quantify that vision story and you end up with metrics, right? So those are your goals. So you set goals. Your goals are, where are you going? Where do you in this next quarter or in this next year, let's say in this next 90 days, in this quarter, this is where we're going. That's how you set your goals. Let's pick one, my favorite, top line revenue, right? So let's say this is our top line revenue goal. This is this is the top line revenue that we're going to do in the next quarter, in the next 90 days, right? So now you have the goals set. Once you have the goals set, you can calculate your marketing budget. Now, good business practices are you should be marketing. You should set aside or invest an 8 to 12% of your top line revenue goal, where you want to end in that period of time, right? So not what you were doing last quarter or not what you're doing currently, but where you want to land, right? So if you were to look at and you say, hey, this quarter, we want to do $250,000 this quarter in services, then you would take 8 to 12% of 250,000 and make that your marketing spend or your marketing budget for the quarter.
That's the part that I wanted you to kind of touch on, because so many people use where they're currently at. A lot of people have heard 8 to 10%. I think the 12% is probably a more accurate growth number. But I never have, before you talked about it, I'd never heard about set that percentage on where you want to grow versus where you're at right now. And I think that 90-day period is better than, like, if you set a 1-year thing and you're like, right now we're at 80,000 and we want to be at 120. Well, that might put a little bit of stress on the 80,000. But if you just take that 90-day step and you're like, I want to go from 80,000 a month to 90,000 a month. Now you're just doing the 8 to 12% of the 90,000. And that's definitely doable. now you're in growth range instead of just maintaining where you're at. So
That's
I
right.
I thought that
and
was
you want to be sensitive to not, you're alluding to cash strapping the business. You don't want to stress the business by cash strapping the business and getting out over your skis on this, right? So if you were to look and you say, okay, so we're going to grow, across these next 3 months from this point to this point, calculate what that budget is, and then give yourself a runway to get there. But do the total spend. So on by the first month, you'll increase to the second month and increase to the third month. And by the third month, you might be over where you would done it if you did it evenly across the 3 months, if that makes sense. That way you're not cash strapping the business, Nick, if you will. So I mean, 10% is a number everybody throws around. 8 to 12% is a best practice. And that's sort of chiropractic or business 101. Business 102 is set your goal and invest to get to the goal. Don't base it on what you're currently doing, but base it on where you want to land.
Yeah. And I definitely think that you've got to take into account, you talk a lot about hunting and farming. You got to take into account that the hunting, it's like, yes, you got to go out and get, you have to spend money to get bodies through the door. Like that is the end all KPI when it comes to especially lead generation marketing. Like how many people are walking through the door based off of these campaigns that we ran. But don't forget about the farming, which is what we kind of touched on earlier, that if you can be ahead of if you can skate to where the puck's moving before the puck gets there, then you're going to be a whole lot more successful in your lead generation. Your hunting is going to be more successful in the next quarter and the next quarter and the next quarter, because you have been planting those seeds. And when it comes time to harvest, it's going to be a whole lot more productive than if all you focus on is just hunting to kill what you need to eat that next week or that next month.
Yeah, that's stressful and very expensive and less effective, right? So you absolutely have to have this constant, and the word we use is consistent, right? So consistency is the new intensity. You want to have a consistency with your anchor campaigns that are happening all the time. That is about, it's content marketing, it's establishing, it's getting that brand established, getting that brand out there, being ubiquitous, making sure that you have consistency across all your platforms, right? So all the things you teach, Dr. Nick. So, that's the farming aspect of this, which is going to make your hunting so much more effective, right? So, those two work together, and it's all wrapped up as part of that marketing budget. So here's a challenge for so many business owners. If you're like me, you grew up thinking that a budget meant you're not allowed to spend more than this amount of money, right? So, and if you achieved your goal even and came up short of the marketing spend or your budget, it was a celebration. You're like, oh, look, I didn't even go over I didn't even reach my budget. It's like, you have to think differently on that, right? So you have to recognize that there's an allocation that you've made. There's a commitment that you've made that you're going to make an investment in this activity to get to punch through that goal, right? So if you recognize that if I don't spend this money, what I'm doing is I'm stifling the growth of the business. It's like oxygen going into an engine, which of course in a combustion engine creates that horsepower that drives growth. And if you pull the cash out of that engine, it's like pulling oxygen out of a combustion engine, you lose horsepower, right? So you end up stifling the growth and derailing the trajectory of the growth, right? So at the end of the day, if I was an investor and I said, I'm going to invest in Dr. Nick's chiropractic practice, and we set goals and we determined that this was going to be your marketing spend, and you came back to me and said, I've got good news and great news. The good news is we hit our goals. The great news is I didn't even spend all the money that we had allocated, for marketing. I'd be pissed. Like, what are you talking about, bro? I'm like, you shorted us. Like, so, my expression around this, Dr. Nick, is spend the money you're going to lose. If you do not make the investment in marketing, you're going to lose money.
Right.
If you're doing it intelligently and with a great plan, with metrics, reporting systems, and the reporting and the meeting rhythms that give you the accountability and the visibility you need.
Well, and I also think that when you have, like a formula, a percentage that you're trying to hit, you got to figure out how you're going to spend that money. Like a lot of the people that are in my CEO group are, multiple clinic doctors. They are very successful. They have huge practices, and some of them are collecting hundreds of thousands of dollars a month. And they are like, man, that 10 to 12% is a big number. it's like scary to think about for them, like, because they're spending right now, a couple thousand a month. They're acting as if they're like some little tiny one doctor office.
Yeah.
They should be treating it like a real organization. And those numbers can, make that, that butt pucker a little bit when you're thinking of that. But if you don't spend that money, you're like you said, you're losing out on, somebody else is going to take that market share, because unfortunately with chiropractic, like, people don't have two chiropractors in a local market. It is a zero-sum game. They're either going to choose you or somebody else. And if you're not investing in, and it doesn't just have to be how much are you spending on Facebook ads or Google ads. It could be like, for example, I have clients that make lots of money that really struggle with getting the content done because they quote unquote don't have the time, right? So when I talk to them about how much they're spending on their marketing budget, I'm like, why are you not investing in whether it's somebody helping you write the content that you need to write, whether it's somebody coming in to be a videographer to make it easier for you so that you can get the content,
do your editing, do your posting, do your copywriting,
a lot of the stuff that we do for clients, like, we cover about 90% of it, but the stuff that needs to happen on the ground, that's where I'm like, that should be going into that 10 to 12% of your marketing budget. But they think about it as ad spend only. But when you're talking about hiring people like me. If you have a marketing director, if you've got to buy lunch, for a lunch and learn, the dinner with the doc, all the things that go into marketing your practice should be going into this number.
Yeah, no question. And, it's worse than you think it is, Nick, to be honest with you, right? Like, so if you go to chiropractic economics and you can just do a search and find out what is the average marketing spend for a chiropractor, let's say in the United States or in Canada or in Australia. So, keep in mind the number is 8 to 12%. That's to a growth investment to get to a goal.
Yep.
In 2020, it was 2.73% in America. 2.73%. That's less than 3%. That's not even sustenance, right? You're not even sustaining your business with that level of marketing.
Right.
Frankly, it's reckless, right? So, and it's not only that you're going to lose market share to another chiropractor. Honestly, I wish that were the truth, but they're not going to end up in another chiropractic office. Where they're going to end up, right? Yeah. So if this is a purpose-driven, mission-driven practice, think about that, right? So being a good steward of your, what you have available to you, it's like you have to be flexing that marketing muscle. Yeah. And, Canada, don't think you're any better. Canada's like 1.43%, right? So it's like we look at these spends, we're like, we're not even in the ballpark of where we're supposed to be. So I know people get sphincteric when I start talking this way, but at the end of the day, how do you get to 10%, 12% of my spend? Like you said, some of our practices are multi-million dollar practices that are doing hundreds, $300,000, $400,000 a month.
Yeah.
How do you justify that spend? Well, you unpack it across, if you look at the attribution, like if you start looking at internal marketing versus external marketing versus digital marketing, and you look at that marketing plan, every aspect of that is going to have some level of an expense associated with that. Make sure you capture that with your bookkeeper. Make sure that they understand that this is the exercise you're doing. You want to earmark those things, in your bookkeeping so you can identify what exactly is my marketing spend. Yeah. And then, like you said, every one of those initiatives has got personnel attached to it, somebody in your team. So if you have dedicated, don't play games. If you have dedicated marketing people on your team, like a marketing director or a marketing manager, right? Or you have a social media manager, what have you, like somebody that's in-house, their payroll, their salary falls underneath this budget. Okay. Right. So that might help people get there. You have a new business development expert, et cetera. And that's internally, right? So that's your internal team of employees. Then you have contractors like yourself, Dr. Nick. Of course, that falls underneath the marketing expense, right? And whatever your associated marketing spend is, that's how people think about it. I mean, all of those things are the real obvious. But, going upstream and looking at opportunities to invest in your practice the ROI will be spectacular, like gifting systems in your practice. It's like, are you gifting your patients? I mean, you can't outspend the ROI that you'll get from gifting great patients, right? That's my challenge to you. Try to do that, right? So external marketing, digital marketing, there's so many opportunities here to get to that 8, 10, 12%. Remember, with the opportunities that are in front of us right now, you want to be the noisiest business in your community who's telling people the truth about how the body really works and how the body really heals.
Yeah. And don't let things that you hear in Facebook groups on like what somebody is, or kind of what the average chiropractor is spending on things. If something is working for you, spend more. Like there are people that should be spending. There are clients that I have that I am. It's almost a constant refrain that I'm going to them. I'm like, you're just not spending enough. Like this is working well. You should be ramping it up, and some people just don't want to, cut the check and don't want to take the risk. But I'm like, man, when you find it's so rare in marketing when you find something that really works and it doesn't always last. Like look at people with Facebook ads right now. There are so many people crying that, it was just like taking candy from a baby 2-3 years ago. And it's like, they can't buy a lead or a conversion now. And I'm like, well, you should have doubled, tripled, quadrupled down when it was going hot. And it's the same way. There's always these like new things that pop up, or like human nature changes, or Google adds a new feature. You got to take advantage of things when they happen. And when you've got something, by the horns, you gotta ramp it up. So it's important that you have that framework of like, what should I be spending? So it's not based off of, well, my friend in California spends $750 a month on Facebook, or $1,000 a month on Google, or whatever it is that they're spending. That's what I should spend too. Their situation is very different than your situation. So like focus on what's working for you and what you're getting results from.
It gets back to the data, right? If you have a data-driven business that has data-driven marketing, and for some people, their brain shut off when you say that to them that way. But, ultimately what you'll recognize is this will be so energizing to you once you do have that data. Yeah. And it's not something you have to do yourself. I don't do it. I have data flow. As a CEO, data flows to you, not through you, right? So to have the reporting systems in place with the experts flowing the information to you, then you're just making data-based decisions. If you see a 3-to-1, 5-to-1, 6-to-1 return on investment, and you're confident about that, this is like not theoretical, it's real returns. Yeah. I mean, if you knew for every $100 that you spend, you got back $500-600, you'd be throwing $100 bills out the window on the way to work, right? So it's like, you've got to recognize that, if you are not making that marketing investment, you're losing money. Spend the money you're going to lose.
Yeah. So let's talk about the immersion coming up. So we've got, like I mentioned earlier, you've got the attraction immersion coming up in Denver, September 30th and October 1st, and in Melbourne, October 14th and 15th. And what is it that you want people to know going into it that they're going to be able to get out of this immersion?
So if this conversation has energized you and you'd like to learn more and go deeper, that's that's what the weekend's about. Yeah. For those of you who kind of feel like you're on your heels a bit this year and you got behind this thing and you're like, I don't have a level of clarity around exactly what the marketing plan looks like, what the marketing budget and the marketing team and what initiatives are working now, and putting together like a plan of action for even the balance of this year. You'll not only have this year, but next year, 2023, so you can get way ahead of this thing. So if you have a marketing director on your team, or maybe that's you, or a marketing manager on your team, or whoever's involved with internal marketing, if you want to learn more about what I talked about as far as like a gifting system or a process-driven referral system, external marketing, which is, all about networking and paraprofessional networking and corporate wellness, outside talks, final screens, all these external networking elements, plus of course, digital. We'll have all of our success partners, including you, Dr. Nick, that are going to be sharing, hey, currently, this is what's happening. This is what you need to be doing. This is where you push those dollars in. So this is not just for the docs. It's bring your teams. It's the September, October. So it's September 30th, October 1st. Date is in Denver, Colorado, at the Gaylord. We're psyched. It's an awesome campus. We'll have 400 people there. I mean, we have another 50 or 60 people there in our success partner arena, and our remarkable team will be there in full force. So we're psyched for that. And then we're going to be in Melbourne, Australia as well. About 25% of our clients are in Australasia. So we'll be in Melbourne, and that is October 14th and 15th. And it's so nice to be live again in Australia. Mm-hmm. Thank the Lord we had the ability to use technology and do things virtually, but it's so great to get hundreds and hundreds of people, chiropractors and chiropractic teams in the room together and just merging ideas and inspiration and energy.
Well, I go to a lot of events, and I don't think there's anybody that does a better job with the in-person events, giving actionable things that you can take home to do. We just did the conversion retention one a couple of months ago, and I'm still implementing, even for leverage media, I'm still implementing a lot of the ideas that I picked up and like the notes that I took there. So like, you just got a great team. You bring in great experts, obviously, you know,
thanks, brother.
Yours included, that really come and share. It's not, these aren't sales pitches. This is just like, here's what is working right now. Here are the things that you and your team can do. You know, I end up talking to a lot of the team members as well after the event. Like if the doctor signs up, sometimes the doctor like brings in other team members, and they just come back like on fire, ready to tackle those challenges. Because my problem has always been throughout my career is like, I go get that wild look in my eye, and then I come back to the office, and they're like, "Oh man, we gotta."
There you go again. Dr. Nick's all fired up
for another week or so.
Yeah.
He'll forget about it. But
Yeah.
man, when you bring the staff and it becomes a staff-driven exercise, that's where I think a lot of the power that you guys bring to the table.
Yeah, man. Thank you so much for that. I received that. We have a fantastic team. You were the one that coined my favorite expression of a description of our team. You know, it's not the Franson show, right? So it's not just Superman, right? So it's the Hall of Justice, right? There's, you know, we have all of these superheroes. You know, we have so many fantastic coaches that specialize in the different seasons of the chiropractic career: launch, build, scale, and exit. We got DC coaches, CA coaches, office manager coaches, you know, marketing director coaches. I mean, it's just awesome, the crew that we've put together, and we've got something for everyone. And bringing your team is not an afterthought. Honestly, I get to write the content and create these, the content for these experiences. We create these events for the team, right? The doctors, you know, I know the doctor's already on fire. The doctor's already motivated. The doctor's already on purpose. And, you know, we know there's a massive opportunity and therefore responsibility for us to get your team aligned, right? To get them fired up and get them equipped. And so they can go back with confidence and help you build that practice.
That's awesome. Well, guys, I obviously, you hear me talk about Dr. Franson and about TRP a lot, just like in passing, but you know, I can't recommend his events enough. I, as a marketing expert, will be in the room with my notebook out, taking notes, because I always get new stuff, new ideas, especially around like the internal, the external side of things. It's just as important as the digital. So I strongly recommend, if you are looking to grow your practice and you want it to grow through a potential recession, that these are the types of events that you should absolutely be going to. So we'll have the links to the landing page in the notes. And also, Dr. Franson, you wrote a book. It's probably up here. Where did it go? Here,
I'm sure I have it.
There you got it right here. So yeah, there we go. So he has been kind enough to share the attraction piece of the book with the listeners, so that you can kind of prepare before you go to the immersion. So we'll have that link as well in the notes. So Dr. Franson, I appreciate you coming on as always and adding tons of value.
It's always a privilege, Dr. Nick. And hey, to reward those that hung around and listened to the whole show. First person that writes "remarkable" in all caps in the show notes, I'll send them a signed copy. So if you can keep an eye on that for me and get me their name and address, just write "remarkable" in the show notes, and I'll send you a signed hard copy.
You can't beat that. Doc, any closing thoughts that people need to be thinking about as we go into the second half of this year?
A recap of: look forward to the future with optimism and positivity, and look at the opportunities. You know, fortunes are made in the downturn, right? So if you work, you know, everybody knows the expression working in your business versus working on your business, or working on your business as opposed to working in your business. I'm going to invite you to work above your business. Take a 3-year view of that business and pull so much of the emotion out of it, and recognize that you're investing in creating that 3-year view of your business. We've got an extraordinary opportunity ahead. Let's build.
Awesome. Well, Dr. Franson, again, I appreciate it. Hope you guys found a lot of value in this conversation, and we'll see you on the next one.